Once again, this is Jerry Ashton with WGRNradio.com, your internet site for all things Occupy. Basically, that's what we've turned into, because the idea behind Occupy Wall Street is to be national and international in scope, and the purpose of 15 Minutes of Fact is to locate those nodules, those people, those organizations, local and worldwide, who have something to do with the Occupy movement. Today we're fortunate to have Ben Roberts with us, who, along with his partner Jitendra Darling out in Novato, California, he happens to be located in Connecticut himself, but between the two of them they put together a website called Occupy Cafe. That's pretty compelling right there, because everybody loves to stop into a cafe. And the idea of Occupy does have appeal to a lot of us. But why in the world did these two come up with something called a way station in the middle of the ether called Occupy Cafe? What's its purpose? What does it propose to do? And how does it contribute to the overall welfare of the Occupy community? So, Ben, I'd like to welcome you to our show today.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, the first thing everybody wants to know is a little bit about you and Jitendra, and then, of course, how did you come up with this idea of Occupy Cafe?
Jitendra and I got together through an initiative called 4 Years.GO, which is a global campaign dedicated to the idea that it's possible to create a thriving, just, and sustainable world for all humanity. So this ties into your statement earlier that the Occupy movement really is much broader than many people might initially think that it is, if they're not active in it, or even if they're active in one part of it. The way that Jitendra and I view this, and what drew us to the movement, was this sense that it's really just a small fraction of what we would think of as a massive global awakening to a need for transformation.
Well, I can agree with the number one, the massive growth, and number two, the massive need within that organization to be able to connect and grow, because communications is difficult at best. And I know that your site that I visited, that's occupycafe.org on the internet, is a very well put together website, and I'd like to have you explain the different elements of it and what people can expect if they dial in.
Sure. So Occupy Cafe, really, we think of it as a conversation space more than a website, and that's partly because a lot of our activity takes place on conference calls, highly interactive calls. We use the Maestro conference platform that some other people active in the Occupy movement might be familiar with from the InterOccupy calls. We collaborated with InterOccupy early on to help them get set up with that, in fact. Our conversations flow between the interactive conference calls, which we do right now Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, and the occupycafe.org website, where we have forum space, we have groups, we have lots of different possibilities. It's essentially a private social network. So a lot of the features people are familiar with on Facebook are available to anyone who goes to that site, and particularly if they become a member, although you can read the content there without being one.
Well, let's give a little bit of a plug to the conferencing telephone system that you use. How did you locate it? Why do you choose to use that? And what if somebody else in an Occupy location wants to be able to adapt that to their world? How does that work?
I've been using Maestro Conference for quite a while, actually. It's part of the work that I've been doing for a couple of years, bringing processes as the World Cafe, which is actually where Occupy Cafe takes its name, to virtual space. So Maestro Conference was developed by us in conjunction, actually, with the World Cafe community, and or was in collaboration with them with some of its particular features, and it's something that I've used because it's so accessible. It allows people to connect simply by their phone. They don't need to download any special software as you would for a lot of webinars, for example. And it's very powerful in terms of how you can control the conversation, and particularly the ability to move people in and out of small groups of various sizes. You can have a call of 500 people at a time, but put them into pairs talking to one another, and then bring them back into one large group for a full group conversation and variants thereof. So that's a very,
having been involved in a couple of your calls, it's a very sophisticated system. What does it cost the person who's calling in? What does it cost the person who's running the occasion?
Well, I would refer people to maestroconference.com to investigate that. Their pricing, they have various pricing plans, and you can also generally, and particularly if you mention Occupy Cafe as a referral, you can get usually some sort of an initial offer trial to test out the technology. It's remarkably simple to use as well as powerful, and compared to some of the other platforms that are out there, it's quite a bit less expensive.
Well, do you have another interesting aspect to your site there, and that is you actually allow for blogs. What does that consist of, and how does somebody become a blogger for you?
Well, anyone who is a member can post a blog. You simply go to the blogs menu tab and click on that and click add a blog, and you can post it. So it's as opposed to the forums, which are kind of a place for communal discussions, and there as well people are able to post topics that they would like to open up for general discussion. A blog is more of a place where people can post their personal reflections, things that they want to share. There's room for discussion to flow out of those, as there would be on the other type of blogs people are familiar with. But we distinguish that from the forum, and that it's more about a personal comment.
Well, that would be the next thing I'd want to ask about, because you have something I've participated in on Mondays, and you also have a Thursday one that's special. But the forum on Monday, especially this coming Monday, is pretty important. Tell us about the orientation of the forum, who participates on that, and what they can look forward to if they dial in this Monday.
Right. So when you say the forum, just to be clear, on occupycafe.org on the website, there's a text-based forum, which was actually what I was referring to a second ago as contrasted with the blogs, which you also have there. So we have discussions that are happening in text online, and then we also have discussions that happen, as we were talking about a second ago, on Maestro Conference, and what you're referring to on the calls, a series we call Vital Conversations, where we have a guest conversation starter that joins us and essentially sparks a large group conversation around a particular theme.
Got it.
Well, so this Monday I could tell you a little bit about that if you'd like.
Yes, please.
We have Jim Barton as our conversation starter this Monday. He was one of the initial core members of Occupy Asheville when it first got going, Asheville, North Carolina. Also a very long time activist in many sectors, environmental, political, and he's a close follower of the United Nations and has a powerfully global perspective, which I think ties in a bit again to that initial theme that I was mentioning of what Occupy really calls forth to me, and what I think it's a part of, which is truly a global movement for systemic transformation. So Jim is going to be talking, his subject is Monday, and this is at from 11 to 1 Eastern Time, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can find a link for that at occupycafe.org right on the main page. His subject is Beyond the Earth Summit, United Nations 2.0. And he's done a lot of imagining around how the United Nations might evolve into a more powerful force. So I'm really excited about the conversation, because it's a subject that he knows a great deal about. As with so much of what we really are seeking to do at Occupy Cafe, we're looking to take the core ideas that have inspired the Occupy movement and that people may be most familiar with when they read about it, for example, and really take it into the larger global context of what I think at heart this is all about.
Well, aren't you launching something called Connect 2012? It's some kind of an initiative that you feel will propel this quest of yours?
That is also true. And Connect 2012 similarly has this global theme. It's based on the idea, really, that when we connect one-on-one with each other, we get in touch with our common humanity, and I think that's something that the Occupy movement has modeled so profoundly. It's a we've seen incredible collaboration among the occupiers on the ground, and a willingness to welcome anyone that shows up, as opposed to a more competitive model. And Connect 2012 is about expanding that kind of connection, bridging gaps that we don't normally bridge in our daily lives, crossing silos. It has 4 phases to it. The first one involves actually interviewing somebody or being interviewed yourself, and then we're collecting the content of those interviews, posting them online for people to view, and then those become the seed of a powerful series of conversations that again take place in our Maestro conference platform, and will be taking place on the website as well. And ultimately, it's leading towards collaborative action and expanding opportunities for people to connect around what they're most passionate about, and most engaged in.
Well, if I could imagine this to be like an actual physical location, is this some form of special working groups that coalesce into a general assembly? Is that what we're talking about?
It has some. No, I wouldn't quite describe it that way. I mean, I love the general assemblies and the working group model that's been developed, and the spokes council models that we see in the on the ground Occupy sites. And what we're doing at Occupy Cafe right now is is really, it offers a way for people who aren't spending their time in those physical occupations as much as others might be, to participate in the broader flow of what Occupy is really about at its core. And so it's a little bit less rigidly structured than a General Assembly might be, or a working group. It's much more about a kind of an open and emergent space where people come and find others with whom they really resonate and connect, and are free to do whatever they want. And as that happens, as more and more people are finding others to work with, or engaging in conversations about what they're most passionate about, what will come out of that, will tie into a lot of what's going on in the Occupy sites, to be sure, but also with so much else that's going on in the world. When we have over 900 members of Occupy Cafe right now, and we've started doing these interviews with them. Almost everyone that I've talked to so far has a particular project that they're already involved in, or that they're imagining launching, if not 3 or 4 projects. So there's so much out there that's happening, and the Occupy movement, really, in its narrow sense that people think about it, with the GAs, the working groups, is just one thread of this global impulse for transformation. And so we're pulling a few more threads together. We're weaving some social fabric. We're weaving a larger cloth of collaboration, and it's much more kind of fluid and emergent in its form.
Well, you've portray Occupy Cafe as a link leader, and at your website, of course, there are links to Facebook, to Twitter. What do you mean by link leader? What does that really mean to somebody who shows up and belongs to other groups, such as I do on LinkedIn, where we have a group called Occupy Everywhere? So how does that work?
Yeah, I think you had Peggy Holman as a guest the other day, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, and I know when we had her in our Monday Vital Conversations series as a conversation starter, she used this term, and I was familiar with the concept, but not the exact term, but I've become quite fond of it. So the idea is that in a network movement like this, there are hubs, there are small coalesced groups of people with lots of communication between all the members in a hub, and then the hubs are linked together, and not everybody in one hub is actively connecting with everybody in another hub. They don't need to, because you have these links that connect all the hubs, so that if I'm in one hub, I'm only 1 or 2 people away from anybody else in the other hubs that are connected to me. And the link leaders are the ones that build those larger connections. Occupy Cafe emerged out of a sense that kind of connection building, that kind of cross-pollinating, was a really powerful and often undervalued need. It goes back again to, think of these 900 people with 900 different projects, and getting the communication flowing among them, helping them to coalesce into hubs, and then giving those hubs a way that they can link to one another. That's what it's all about.
Well, I'm also intrigued by the fact that you have an Occupy Live feed where there's news that's fed into your website so that somebody's on that site will be kept apprised with what's going on in the world while they're doing something that's going on within their world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is from an initiative called 99% News. One of our early members at Occupy Cafe was part of this, and it's the stories that they highlight, I think, are based on reader recommendations and tied specifically into the community that's been drawn to Occupy. So it's a nice way to get a pretty wide range of news. It's not narrowly defined solely in terms of what happened in an Occupy session.
Does this then, silly question, we already know the answer to it, but somebody might wonder, is this going to replace the need for feet on the ground, that we don't have to be camped out in parks and thrown out anymore? What's the purpose of this in comparison to physical locations?
Face-to-face, belly-to-belly conversation is incredibly important and energizing, and this in no way is replacing that. In fact, our goal is to integrate with that. So, we emerged out of the energy that happened on the ground, and we have a number of ideas and members within the cafe that are inspired around the idea of creating other forms of face-to-face gatherings. Occupy your kitchen table and your living room, or gatherings of larger groups that include not only Occupy, but people who are active in the transition initiative or Move On or local sustainability groups. There are a lot of intersecting movements and campaigns out there. The Occupy movement is starting to do this now. I've seen that they're collaborating with Move to Amend, with United for Peace and Justice. There has been some resistance, I know, particularly with Move On around too close a connection. And I think but there are ways to have convenings that don't have sort of an official Occupy stamp on them, but are still very vital gatherings, very, very generative and productive ways to get people together. So those are the kinds of things that Occupy Cafe is drawn to support, and we'll be seeing more of that as time goes on.
Well, for an operation that advertises itself as being an open space for global conversation, you're certainly fulfilling that role. And I want to be sure that people listening to this podcast can reach you at your email, which is connect@occupycafe.org. Since we're coming close to our 15 minutes of fact completion, how would you like to leave our conversation? What would you like to say to the listeners?
I think what I'd like to say is talk just for a second about the power of conversation. I've heard a number of people sort of at the heart of organizing the Occupy movement fretting about the message not being coherent, and too many of the headlines are focusing on violence when nonviolence is, of course, at the core of what's really driving the heart and soul of the Occupy movement. And I want to suggest the movement's been phenomenally successful in getting its message out, and the testimony of that is the conversation globally has changed, and there's incredible power in conversation. It's really like the lifeblood of human beings as a social community. As one of my idols, Juanita Brown, says, what if conversation is to humans as water is to fish? And so the Occupy movement has been incredibly successful in bringing forth a new global conversation. And I want to encourage people to take that energy out into the world wherever they find an opportunity.
And I encourage people to visit Occupy Cafe and, as I did, join in, meet some really, really great people to connect with and participate in that global conversation. Thank you once again, Ben Roberts.
Thank you so much, Jerry. It's great to be here.